Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the CBRE Market Outlook for 2018.
What we want to do is just take a look at the high-level outlook, the context for real estate, and dig into some of the really big issues as we see them facing the sector, facing our markets. All of the major emerging markets around the world are expanding. For the first time in many, many years, it's difficult to find a major economy that isn't actually growing. So that context is very, very positive for demand, positive for real estate. If you're looking at the global markets, there is no question that we are late, arguably very late, in the economic cycle.
I try to bring to Australia economy into four contexts. The number one is to look at the different states. I think the first time, in many, many years, finally we are seeing some growth in Queensland, in Australia. So finally, four major states, they are going to see some growth, which is moving in the right directions.
What's investors' primary motivation for investing in real estate? And these are the Asia Pacific results, and it's quite interesting because they're quite different to what we see in other parts of the world. Last year, at the start of 2017, you can see that people weren't so worried about diversification. Stability of income stream was important, but actually there was still a significant proportion of investors who were investing in order to secure capital value growth.
For Asia cities, Hong Kong, Singapore, Guangzhou, the spread is virtually zero. Where is the value? So no wonder a lot of investors are thinking about those cities could potentially be overpriced. If you look at moving to Pacific, particularly in Australia, you can see even you guys think about, Sydney is very expensive. But for foreign investors' point of view, the spread is very, very attractive. So that's why investors are coming in to acquire assets. More and more investors, they're moving beyond the gateway cities. The interest for regional secondary cities has shook up.
There are various reasons why interest is picking up. Obviously, the overcrowding, the competition within the core sectors is part of it. In many cases, the yields in these alternative sectors for the best quality assets are just as competitive as they are in the core parts of the market. We see this increase not just in the proportion of people invested, but a big uptick this year in the number of people who are actively pursuing investments in at least one of these sectors. The world has changed. Now, what people want to be talking about is what's going on in the world, the disruption that we see going on. And this is really characterizing a lot of the emphasis that investors are placing now. It's not just a question of which sector or which market do we want to be in. It's how do we understand the fundamental changes that are going on in those sectors and how do we try and benefit from them.
Mobility is very, very important. For future workplaces, it's going to be very, very mobile. Agile is a word that people use. Flexible spaces is the trend. It's here to stay. It's not going to disappear.
There's a clear shift that occupiers taking these sorts of amounts of space that previously would have gone down the conventional route are in many cases shifting focus and going in via the flexible route. But there's obviously also concern, particularly amongst investors, as to what does this trend mean for the value of offices. And that ultimately what we're likely to see is in modern buildings and in tenant portfolios overall is that certainly a chunk of the building is going to be dedicated to co-working space, whether operated by a third party or by the landlord themselves. And also we will see an increase in the amount of amenity space that we see within the building of other types. From a property point of view, one of the key implications is going to be that flexible leases are going to become more common.
I think for Australia context, infrastructure investment as well as the housing markets are actually driving a major demand for modern facilities.
Active management to drive value is absolutely key. It's kind of back to good old-fashioned real estate. You can't just rely on yield shift to drive capital value growth. It's all about actively managing the asset, managing the tenants and driving the income.
The pace of change and the quantum of change does at times feel more like a revolution than an evolution. Things are changing quickly. I think we all recognize this.
It's not just about tenant and occupiers anymore. It's about the end user and customer experience. It's all about experience. So Omnichannel is now about omni-experience. And we're really seeing that shift in a big way in property management.
Integrated landscapes are now distributing products through multiple channels. And this is happening in the business-to-business market as well as the direct-to-consumer arena.
I keep hearing a lot about the emphasis on experience. And as an investor, one of the questions that comes to mind for me is who's going to pay for all of this? And at what point does it have an impact on value?
I think that the revolution's already been. I think that technology has been the enabler that is changing the way that people work now and the way that people are going to work in the future.
One of the big things in residential is with the development of anything is who's going to pay for it, and in a lot of cases the apartment buyer, unless they're intending to occupy, won't pay for something as an investment where they don't see a return on it. So where there'll be increases in technology or great gains is where there'll be really demonstrable sort of benefits to owners, and where technology lessens building costs or maintenance costs. So that's probably the area where I think there'll be more advance in technology than anywhere.
There's a lot going on in the capital market sort of landscape right across all different asset classes, but the real revolution, the big change in the market is the advent of multifamily. And that is here, and that is here to stay, and it's a very, very interesting space that a lot of people are looking into, and that we're certainly backing.
And I'm going to agree with Mark Koster and say that multifamily is going to establish itself as a real asset class in the future.
The world's changing really, really rapidly, and the technology piece that we talked about earlier on means that we know that it's going to continue to change and evolve relatively quickly, and we don't know what that necessarily holds. So again, we want more flexibility in what we can do with our businesses. It's not only the top end of town or the big end of town that's looking for the flexibility, the small end of town's looking for that flexibility as well.
I don't think flexibility is limited just to office. In the retail space, we're seeing more pop-up stores, we're seeing more market floors, we're seeing large brands do small miniaturised retail spaces as well. We're seeing incubator space, we're seeing brand testing in the retail formats, which is very different to what we've seen before.
That need for flexibility is actually bringing new products to market. Technology is definitely disrupting what we know as those kind of traditional operating models. Artificial intelligence in the logistics sector translates to automation, and this is really well-established technology now. So the focus is on increased efficiency and maximum utilization of assets and resources. The implication in the logistics sector is that occupiers who adopt these solutions will be able to afford a premium for properties that can support their technology and are in the right location for their supply chain network.